on the ruling that was made?
Honorable Etangula, as the Speaker of the National Assembly, has a duty, first as a leader of an institution of such repute, is that to be able to be seen as somebody that pretty much works in the interest of the law. And at the very least, as a lawyer of many years, he's been a lawyer for well over 40 years since he left law school. And so as to be somebody that understands the importance of respecting the rule of law, the court decisions. The court decision was made in plain English. The judge was not speaking French or any other Arabic language. He spoke in a plain, clear English, in a language that everybody understands, that even a standard 6 kid or grade 6 for now would be able to interpret what the decision of the court was. And the decision of the court was that as at the time when members of parliament got elected, they were all subject to specific coalition agreements, and that their parties, including the parties that are in the north, which were led by Captain Ali Roba, who was a governor, now senator. He had a party and he had members of parliament that came from, that were elected as part of a well-written coalition agreement of the Azimio coalition. And that at that particular time, when this speaker was given an opportunity to decide which is the majority in the House, he forgot to just follow the law as it was written.
Forgot.
Completely, intentionally. Yes. Because the numbers are not so complex. 290 people Fred actually can fit in the studio if you properly squeeze them. It's not that too much of a bigger number to just ask who belongs where. If at all you cannot see it on paper, you can also physically do a head count and be able to define that. And the court pronounced itself clearly on that decision, that based on the coalition agreement as per that particular time, the members of this coalition party were the most, and it was only a formality for the speaker to be able to implement that. But somehow he was unable to do that, which shows not gross incompetence, but a deliberate decision to disrespect a court ruling, which in many ways can be considered as contempt of law.
Sankara.
Okay, the National Assembly Speaker has been given this role of saying, he doesn't decide, but he announces. He's like the Chebukati of the National Assembly. So, let's take it back. On election day, Kenyans woke up and elected their representatives from the president to the MCA. And when you look at the MPs, on that election day, there were more Azimio MPs than Kenya Kwanza MPs. That was on election day. But now, as at now, the times have changed. Even the political structure and the formations have changed. We saw the first people to leave the Azimio ship were the MPs from the northern frontier districts, and another group, the Jubilee party led by Sabina Chege, and then the latest ones were the ODM MPs led by Akina Jalango. So we have seen these changes. But now this court ruling comes at a time when it's like 2 years late. I think it has been overtaken by events. Because right now, if the courts had ruled at that time when the thing was still in contention, it would have made sense. But right now, 2 years,
two years down the line,
it's a
little bit too late.
Yeah, it's a little bit too late, because even if you look at the formations, right now, if you count the member of parliament who are loyal to Azimio, who, if they say Azimio MPs line up this way, Kenya Kwanza MPs line this way, you will realize that those who subscribe to the Kenya Kwanza are more than those who subscribe to Azimio. So it's actually a complex thing, because when you look closely, you realize that it was like a script from the beginning, because the president knew that for him to stand a chance, even in public perception, he needed to have more MPs than the opposition, who at that time, they were even, the Kate course was ongoing for the election petition. So he really needed those numbers on his side. And when the MPs from the northern Kenya part, northeastern, jumped ship, they actually tilted the scale to be in his favor. So even right now, the speaker is looking at this in a political angle, because
this is tricky, because by the time the case was filed, the situation was different on the ground.
yes.
So now, maybe Ngaira, you can help us here.
Yes.
The ruling has been made, but the situation, it has come 2 years too late. The situation on the ground has changed. How does the speaker play it out? Because I remember he said, you know, one of the things you can do, line them up here, and you will know which party has the majority.
You know, Fred, criminal liabilities or illegalities have no timeline. We can even come 60 years later and say...
Is this criminal liability?
I'm just saying, I'm
okay.
giving you
Yeah,
a legal, just
Yes.
a reality check. Is that you can commit a crime here and disappear for 40 years, but when you show up, once we spot you around the streets, we just take you back to court and charge you for your crimes.
Yes.
And so also, but also then Kenya is a country of law and order. And so the court does not apply personal opinions or feelings of what you think about what has happened or what has not happened. Reason being is that then that is the only way we can have an orderly society. The decision is that when Parliament was formed at that particular time, and the coalitions, remember there were pre-election coalitions that were made, and they were deposited with the register of political parties, which are legal entities. I mean, legal documents, you understand? So based on that decision, and that's what even the judge said, at that particular time when these people got elected and they were sworn into Parliament as members of Parliament, the Speaker ought to have purely based his decision on what the coalition agreements were, to be able to determine who is the lead, who are the majority leaders and the minority leaders in Parliament. That one is all that counts. The rest are personal opinions. You see, in law, what I came to learn about criminal law is that, Fred, I could commit a crime. I could commit a crime, and you are a judge, and you're actually seeing through a window and see that guy actually either assaulting somebody. He's actually committing a crime, but there's a criminal process that he has to go through. Somebody has to complain, then they will go report to police, write a statement, get an OB number, then the investigation officer picks up the case from there, looks at the facts of the case. If they're strong enough, then he has to forward it to the DPP, who then goes to court and charges the fella. Even though you're a judge and you've seen across the window the guy assaulting the other guy. So sometimes that's what the law is. And because even though at a personal level, emotively, you might say, but I saw this guy assaulting the next person. This is assault is part of there's a criminal offense according to our penal law. So that is what happened, is that the decision that Wetangula made as at that particular time when Parliament was formed was illegal, because the coalition agreements were clear and all the parties that were in the part of the Azimio coalition as of that particular time become the majority per house. And that doesn't change just because a few people along the way have changed their emotions, because that's not what is on paper legally. Yes. Okay.
But Fred, you know, there are two types of defections.
Yes.
There's one when someone defects from a party, like say someone from UDA joins ODM. That way, I think even my friend who is a legal mind can advise us on that. The person is supposed to go back for re-election and now come back using that party.
Yes.
But now here is a case whereby this is a party, a whole party has reneged on the agreement. Yes, on the agreement, and they have written another post-election agreement, because the one which UDM made was a pre-election agreement with Azimio. Yes. But then the whole party shifted and now made another post-election agreement with UDA. I think that one is also binding. We won't just look at the pre-election agreement. The post-election agreement also is binding. So in this case, I think the speaker is also a legal mind, and he knows how to maneuver around the law. Plus, he's also playing politics. He knows that once I say that Azimio is the majority party, these guys will come for me. Yeah, they'll come for me, because the judgment was made in the same breath that he's holding that position illegally by virtue of him being a party leader. So he is trying to also save himself. He's not just fighting for Ichungwa to remain the majority leader, but he's also in the middle of a political fight of his own. Yes.
You see, Fred, the late President Kibaki is the most popularly elected president in the history of our country. He got almost 63% of the vote. No other president has ever gotten such a percentage. But shortly after, 2 years later, he became easily one of the most unpopular presidents, and even lost a referendum, a public referendum where Kenyans queued and said, we no longer agree with this government. You see, human beings can change decisions, but law and order dictates that you still operate within the legal time frame. You understand? So did President Kibaki, never mind Kenyans had changed, that's the assumption because he lost the referendum. It's like an opinion poll on the popularity of the president. You would have easily said Kenyans have changed their minds. The very Kenyans who elected him popularly, it can be perceived they've changed their minds midway. But that didn't mean that then he has to stop his term, because his term is dictated by law. It has to be 5 terms. That's what I'm saying. So opinions could have changed midway. You understand, in as far as the dynamics of parliament are concerned. However, the law says the parliament, the Speaker of the House, defines the majority and the minority immediately the MPs are sworn in. At that particular time is when he makes that decision. Not many years or months or many years afterwards. You understand? That's why the court said, as of the time when he made that decision, it was an illegal decision because already there were clear existing coalition agreements, and 290 members of parliament are not too many. It's just a 30-minute thing. We just look at the register, from the register of political party, you look at the registered coalitions, and you define who the winner were. That was the decision that was made at that time was wrong. Then secondly, just to add to what you're saying, that people could actually make post-election agreements, indeed it's true that in fact part of the Azimio agreement is that parties could move out of the coalition, but it had been given a time frame that you can only exit the coalition after 6 months. You understand? 6 months after you get into parliament. By then is when you can legally consider too late, because the speaker doesn't have to wait for 6 months for the speaker to change their minds. He has a duty, because you've said he doesn't determine who becomes. He only reads the decision that has been given to him based on the report from the register of political parties that these are the elected members of parliament, but the coalition agreements are in this format. Therefore, how many form each of the coalitions, and then that gives him a room to define who is the majority. So Fred, it is indeed true, and in fact 6 months later, I think Ali Rob and a few others, we even saw the other day, Martha Karua also exiting that coalition. It is within the right, because part of the agreement was that 6 months after that you could exit. However, the decision on the House and the legality of who forms a majority and minority is a well-defined, it is by law well-defined as to when that has to be determined. It is immediately members of parliament are sworn in. Once they elect the speaker, then that becomes the first duty of the speaker to define who then is the minority. And that decision then was wrong. That is the decision that is in court. It's a very simple decision that a lawyer of 40 years like Honorable Tangula should not even doubt about it. And this is why I'm saying Kenyans have a duty going forward as they elect their leaders, is that then for the very first time, and I'm hoping that we can really divert ourselves from the kind of sideshows that we're currently seeing in our politics. And when you look at the trajectory that our politics towards 2027 is concerned, is that people are really trying to drag us into sideshows like the tribal animosity and things like that, so that we forget characters that have completely failed in their when you look at the history of their leadership for the many decades they've been in power, there is nothing to show for it. 40 years Kalonzo has been in parliament, for example. Wetangula has been in Kanu for 30 years, since 1992. You can trace the history, same to this President William Ruto. If we were supposed to just look at the history and the character of the person, you have a president that has not only just been to court for local fraudulent cases, which are part of record, I'm not just alluding it, and has been all the way. These are characters that should never be in any office. That's why Kenyans went into the constitution, Fred. You know, we have a whole chapter on leadership and integrity.
Yes.
It was put there by Kenyans. It was supposed to vet the kind of leaders that actually end up being part of the leadership of this country. And so when you look at the character of somebody like Wetangula, you then ask yourself, how did he even end up? And it's unfortunate because he's my senator. You understand? It's extremely unfortunate that he's been my senator and a leader in my county for a very long time. So that's what I'm saying, it's a bad day to be a Westerner today because of these kinds of wrong decisions. Because at one point, as a Kenyan and as a patriot, I need to stand by the decision that I think is right. And for some other reason, for political optics, I'm expected to entertain the kind of charade that the same speaker has done, which is very unfortunate. So, Fred, I think it doesn't matter what happens midway in the term. That's why I'm giving an example of even the presidency. People can change their mind and say this is no longer a good president, a bad president. But legally, he has a time frame. It's 5 times together.
A 5-year term.
Yeah, so members of parliament could have changed, but the legal decision that was made by the speaker at that particular time was not correct.
Now, let me ask you, because it baffles me, how was this going to play out? If Azimio had been the leader of majority, meaning they are the ones who are going to determine the agenda for the House, it would have been completely impossible for this president to operate. Am I right?
You are very right, Fred, because, you know, by choosing the leader of majority or the majority party, it doesn't just stop at the top. It will have far-reaching ramifications in the House and how the House conducts its business, because you will have to change the chair of the budget committee, chair of the finance committee, and also the chair of these important committees in the House. They will have to be changed to reflect the new decisions that have been made, especially on matters constitutionalism. So the president will have had a very hard time. And now even the timing of this revival of this court case, I think I see President Ruto's hand in it.
What do you mean?
Because
you mean let me get you. You're trying to say that the timing of the release of the ruling,
yes,
has you perceive that the president was involved?
Yes, I believe the president was involved, because if you look at the House business, we are heading to the business end of the season. This now the time when the budget is almost being discussed. I think the president wants to entrench Azimio and ODM into the House business so that they can help him to push his agenda. Because you see, once that is ratified, it will mean that Junet and ODM will be the ones leading the push for the finance bill. And I think that's now where he wants to trap them inside there. Because as per now, I think he has used Akina Ichungwa, and I think he wants to dispose them. So he needs new blood, and that's why the timing is after 2 years. And we all know that the president has a very big influence in the courts. It's it's not a secret.
Well, that's let's just say, because he's not here to defend himself.
Yes,
let's just say that's an opinion.
Yeah, it's an opinion.
That's an opinion that he has influence in the courts, because we've seen other instances where the government's will has been shot down in the courts. Yeah. But it would have made it impossible for him to achieve his objectives on the floor of the House. If you can't rule Senate, if you don't have control of the National Assembly and Senate, well, you won't push your agenda.
Absolutely.
You become a slave.
You know, nowadays, the format of parliament post the 2010 constitution is that then it operates largely on committees, unlike the way it used to operate on the main house back then, where you could then be able to, it was taking too long to make certain decisions.
Yes.
And so now decisions can be executed in multiple by multiple teams at the same time because of that. So obviously a decision to turn back a decision to turn back to change the leadership of the House from minority from minority to majority then gives them the chairperson's positions in most of the critical committees in Parliament, which then, and the chairs of the committees are the ones who sort of set the agenda of what the committees do and summon the teams and meetings and things like that, which then also gives the number of representation on the panel, because the majority gets a slightly more numbers. So if you have 9 members in a committee, they might get 5. So you're constantly outnumbered. And as far as you're constantly outnumbered in in most of the committees, and that would mean then you can very easily veto a lot of government decisions.
Yes.
However, Fred, Parliament has a very critical role in as far as managing the affairs of a country is concerned. That's why I pray one day we even just halfway embrace the South African government, Parliament, because South African Parliament has now successfully chased away 2 presidents, sitting presidents, and even jailed one, and they moved on. Nothing happened. I am hoping that one day we can have a parliament that can fire these presidents and hopefully jail one.
But look at the dynamic situation South Africa finds itself in.
Yeah.
Because they vote parties.
Yeah.
They don't vote individuals.
Absolutely.
And I hope, as you're saying, we can come to that point whereby it's either we believe in political parties and not individuals.
Fred, during the Okoa campaign to change the Kenyan constitution, I attended a lot of meetings for that Okoa team, the brainstorming sessions. And one of the proposals was to turn Kenya into a parliamentary system. And I remember on that debate, the people who were resisting that were probably were resisting it on a tribal basis. And they were mostly the mountaineers who were saying, because Kikuyus we are many, and so we need to, it will not be fair because, and it was a legal, it was a genuine argument, because somebody was giving an example of Ruiru or something like that. Was saying Ruiru constituency has almost 600,000 people, 700,000 people. That is almost 4 times a normal constituency, because most of constituencies have 150, maybe 200,000. So with 600, 700,000, it actually means Ruiru can house 4 constituencies, you understand? So they're saying if we go for the parliamentary system today, we would be shortchanged. And then I was giving them an example of my home county of Kakamega, where I was saying we equally have, and I come from the largest sub-county in Kakamega as well. Malava constituency has almost 120,000 voters. That means you take Boni Halole's constituency of Ikolomani, which is 30,000. You take Governor Fernandez Barazo's constituency of Matung, which is around 30-40. You take Cleophas Malala's Mumias West. 4 constituencies to just meet the number that my constituency has. That means a gubernatorial candidate from my constituency
Can
just needs 3 constituencies.
Yes.
Malava, Lurambi, and Lugari. Lugari and Likuyani. Those 3. And you're home and dry, because, and I can imagine the next election how things would be, including where our women rep, currently Mama Elsie Mwanda is also running for governor, and she comes from Halale's constituency and from the same tribe, same clan. So that vote would completely split in so many ways. Anyway, my point is this, that I've always advocated for a parliamentary system, Fred, because it kind of reduces us from these ethnic tensions that we have. Why am I saying that? It's because 100,000 Kikuyus and Ruiru can go and vote an MP. And you only need 10 Pokots to show up in Pokot South, and they also elect an MP. And in parliament it will only be 1-1.
Yes.
The difference could be partial. Maybe the Pokots are busy doing other things. They might not be as passionate about politics as the characters in Kiambu here. You understand? So them characters in Kiambu could even go to hospitals and drag patients to go and vote. But in Pokots, a Pokot could be on top of a tree somewhere in a forest, just waiting for the last 10 minutes to run to the ballot and elect. You understand? Yeah. So it sort of reduces the tension, because then this business of tyranny of numbers completely ends. Because then you'd have 290 members of parliament. So even if 5 million central people show up to the ballot, Fred, they will only produce 29 MPs. I'm talking of central Kenya, forget the mountain.
Yes.
They're just the 5 counties which you call native Kikuyu counties. I think 29 or 30 something like members of parliament there. Even if all of 5 million people show up for that, it will only just require another 30 from Western, and that vote will never change.
Yes.
And you can see they could be double the population of what is there. It reduces the business of people going on rooftops and top of cars saying that, you know, you can bring 5 million. Because that thing might be nice when you're campaigning, but in real politics, when now resources are in play, it brings what you call ethnic tension. So it's something that I've been supporting as far as our parliamentary system is concerned, so that then we have very strong parliament that can be able to check presidents. The South African format allows them to actually be able to also accommodate other minority factors like the women, people with disabilities, because a party just wins the seats and then it spreads a party list, which then is able to spread. So we say, for example, I have a party and we run for a race, we get 50, 60 seats, then we have the 60 seats. We can spread and say we have 4 groups, women, youth, people with disability, business organizations, and then we split by 4, and then we divide them. It helps in being able to meet that. I am praying that we're able to get that, because, Fred, this
country must come to a level where we have a parliament that can check a rogue president and hopefully impeach and jail. My prayer has always been that we use this William Ruto as an example to be the first president that, just like Jacob Zuma, I'm not talking about streets, I'm saying you hold, because there's a legal process.
Yes.
And the Kenyan law says no one is above the law. There's no, I've read the constitution, Fred.
Yes.
I was there in 2005 when we were doing the draft as a
Yes.
student in Parklands, and I've seen that constitution. There is nowhere where it says that there's any Kenyan that is above the law. It just gives some reservations.
During his term.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But 24 hours, not even 24 minutes after he ceases to be president, he can appear in court as an individual and face the law. So that's what I'm saying, that one day then you impeach him, then take him to court just like Jacob Zuma. And my prayer is that he becomes an example of a president that we jailed. So that future presidents like myself can be able to learn something about what happens when you fail to respect the law. And I think that is the only way we can work. Otherwise, Fred, we're going to have a very strong presidency. Remember the judiciary, for example, the one that he was alluding to, from the Chief Justice to the sweeper, none of them is an employee of William Ruto. None. You understand? Yes. And they don't even answer to, it's a whole arm of government.
Yes.
They're not even supposed to be begging for money as it is now.
Yes.
You see a Chief Justice saying, he's writing to the president and telling him, we need a court in Mandera. How? That's why Kenyans passed the budget, added the budget making process as the fourth function of parliament, was to end the business of Mtukufu Rais. You're old enough to know that. Yes. Those days, President Moi would come to Moranga and say, Mtukufu Rais, tunaomba sijui tap ya maji. You know, those kind of things. So they said no. So budget appropriation must be executed in parliament. Yes. And it was to free parliament from the business of going to the big trips you see to State House. They're actually very illegal. We are supposed to just come to parliament, say this is what is available from the Department of Treasury, that we've collected, KRA has collected, say 2.4 trillion, which I have seen, by the way, they are looking forward to how to present a budget of 4.2 trillion. Yes. I don't know what's happening with this president.
But Parliament, as it is right now, the way it's constituted and the laws that govern Parliament, it's supposed to be able to check the presidency, isn't it?
Yes. You know, the framers of our constitution were very deliberate in making Parliament an entity that is independent. All these three arms of the government, the judiciary, executive, and the legislature, are all supposed to be independent organs of the government. But now the problem is that the executive is too overbearing, because everything, these other arms of the government depend on the goodwill of the executive. The judiciary depends on the executive to provide the budget for them to conduct their affairs. Likewise, Parliament is also led by politicians who are loyal to the presidency. And now the presidency is overbearing. That's why you see anytime when there is a bill to be discussed in Parliament, the parliamentarians don't just come and debate the issues without undue influence. You hear that there is a parliamentary group meeting, because even the president belongs to a party. So you find that these MPs will follow what they are being told, and so you find that now the parliament and the judiciary have both become the rubber stamp of the executive. They don't even care what Kenyans need or what the constitution wants. They are all there to look after their own interests. Because, for example, Parliament, you see the issue of CDF. CDF was scrapped and said that it was unconstitutional. But look at the power which Parliament has. Right now, Parliament has the power to decide the salary they get. You know, that's something which is very wrong. How can someone who is employed determine his own pay? Yes. Even the other day, there was a tax on the motor vehicles which they were buying. They scrapped it off. This is hurting the taxpayer. But now the president and the executive hold the keys to Parliament, because they are the ones who bring the budget. So they use this one as a bait.
The president and
the executive. They hold the keys to Parliament through the budget.
But that budget goes through Parliament to be debated upon, to be the process of making that budget. So meaning Parliament itself, if we wanted to, can paralyze the executive by failing to pass the budget if it's not in line with what they want.
Yes, Parliament has that power, but now the executive has more power than Parliament because they give them a bait. You pass this, which we want, because you remember it's the executive through the treasury that draft this budget estimates, then they take them to Parliament. So when they take them to Parliament, they tell them, we want you to pass this, then we also put a provision for you for CDF. If you don't pass it, then the first thing that is being scrapped off is the CDF. So you see the twisting which the executive is using to overbear these other arms of government. Even the judges, you see, if they rule against the government, their budget is cut. So there's
and there's security.
Yeah, then there's security. They withdraw their security. So you find that this executive is actually too powerful for these other arms of government.
I think as long as we have men, we will always have the kind of problem we are talking about. We've changed the system, we've changed the institution. We have probably the most anti-corruption fighting institutions in the country, funded by the taxpayer and stealing from the taxpayer. So, unless we get angels to come, I don't think this is going to change anytime soon.
But the trick is that everyone should just be loyal to the rule of law. Let the law take its course. Because here in Kenya, we have a very strong constitution. If this constitution can be followed to the latter, Kenya will be a world-class country. But now the men and women who are supposed to implement this constitution are the ones who don't care about it, because they know that there are no consequences to it. Because even the speaker right now, he knows that he has political cover.
There's nothing that is going to happen to
whether
him.
he follows the constitution or not.
Nothing will happen
The
to
moment
him.
that he has the political arena in support of him, because even yesterday we saw the Mulembe Nation MPs saying that mtu asiguze Wetangula. That one in itself says that he has already sought political cover for his misdeeds, and that's now the problem we have as Kenyans. When someone has messed, instead of following the law, then we make it up. Yes,
he becomes a member of a community.
Yes, we make
Yet
it up.
the crime was committed by an individual.
Yeah, now it moves from being a legal issue to a political issue, and once it becomes a political issue, anything can be allowed, because with politics you don't really have to do what is right. You only need to do what is right politically, not right legally, and then you'll survive.
Let's see how, as this is playing out, tomorrow definitely will mark a very important day in Kenyan politics, in the sense that whether Raila Odinga wins the AUC chairmanship or not, things will play out very differently. I know President William Ruto is praying that, Raila wins the AUC chair so that he can get him out of the political scene in the country. Things are not as cool as they look, are they?
Absolutely. President William Ruto now is a wounded president who knows very well that he's probably the most unpopular. It's shocking that you can be that unpopular in 2 years. Usually sometimes presidents, it's in their second term and people begin to get tired of a president, but not just 2 years into an election. And this is a president who actually narrowly survived a civilian coup, because what the Gen Z did could have easily sent him out of office.
True.
And so it just tells him, and you see those people didn't leave the country. I have a friend of mine, she's a lady, she's a South African lady, she lives in Pretoria. That day when the Gen Z were on the streets, that clip, that moment where they're getting into parliament and these police are shooting.
Yes.
And the guys keep going until they eventually kick in the speaker's door and get into parliament. She sent me the video because she's been here and I took her around parliament. I took her, it's an area she was familiar with, the KICC.
Yes.
So she was asking, she sent me a video and say, is this really Kenya? I said,
me, you know, she was asking me on WhatsApp, is this really Kenya or this is Somalia? I said, this is Kenya. I said, is that really the place we are? I said, yes, this is the place we are. He didn't believe it.
Yes.
You see, Fred, those characters, those people you saw on video did not leave the country. They're around.
Some of them have joined the ODM.
Forget the few called leaders.
Yes.
There were people on the streets in 35 countries.
Yes.
Most of 35 counties, sorry. So most of whom are still Kenyans and are still around and probably still hold the same opinion of what they had about government on that day.
Yes.
So this president fully understands what is at stake. So he's now hoping that then Raila Odinga, the African Union, can have an exit plan and by by in the name of consolation of the AU seat, so that then he can move out of the Kenyan politics. But you have to understand this: Raila Odinga was the most popular opposition leader in 2007,
yes,
and ODM party had the majority members of parliament in the National Assembly.
Yes.
5 years later, in 2013, the members of parliament were reduced to a much smaller number.
Yeah.
The same reduced in 2017, and today ODM is at its lowest.
Yes.
Even with Raila Odinga in the ballot, it has the least number of MP by percentage based on compared to what they had the first time they ran. It means even with Raila still as a candidate, the party has gone down. So when he exits the scene, then it can only tell you what ODM can only become. Times have changed, Fred. The political dynamics have changed, and the president is hoping, and this is what I'm telling you about the ethnic arithmetics, which is something that I detest because I saw what it means. Fred, me and you, I could be thinking I'm just fighting you by talking about Kikuyu, but there's actually innocent people somewhere on the streets who are minding their business, and then they get caught up in the process. They get caught up in the process and they lose people. I remember one time during that time after the post-election violence and things like that, a friend of mine called Kenneth Yogo was part of these civil organizations. I attended an event at the Stanley, at the balcony, you know, the first floor lounge that is there at the Stanley, and it was by an event organized by CMD, the Center for Multi-Party and Democracy. At that time was being led by an extremely wonderful lady called Jerry Kabeberi, a patriot, and they are these victims of the post-election violence, the women that were coming from Kiambai in Eldoret, and those ones that had survived the ordeal. And they were telling these stories. And remember, then I'm an ODM person, a life member of ODM. And I'm in this meeting and they're clearly saying it's purported that these were ODM supporters that attacked these Kikuyus. And I sat and kept on thinking myself, where did I even for one time say that if we lose this election, you're supposed to go to the neighboring character that appears to be Kikuyu? It was not part of it. It was partly because it was incitement and build up that is being done over time, and then people build those perceptions. And so to be able to avoid such thing, you need to develop a certain constituency in Kenya. In the US, what they call the swing vote. That's why in the US, even though there are 50 states, but most presidents just target the swing states. Because it has already been defined that in the Eastern America, New York and those states, they are largely Democrats. But when you come to the Midwest and the South, are largely Republicans. So you don't really need to campaign much because those were what you call made-up voters. But the real people who actually decide the election are the ones in the swing votes. So they know about 7 or 8 states that if you win them, then you just know you've won that election. We need that kind of number because we might never be able to fully do away with tribalism. But we need maybe 20 or 30% of Kenyans that can always look at elections in a much more objective way. Because 20-30% of 30 million would easily mean 15 million people. You understand? Or maybe 10 million people. Who then, while these characters would be doing the machinization like the kind this president is doing, that, you know, if I get Raila and Raila becomes AUC chairman, I've gotten these 5 million votes from Western. You know, that's the arithmetic they're doing. But in between here, they are forgetting we have people like me who've been life members of ODM for 20 years, who has moved on from the business of ODM and is no longer interested with the business of ODM, but have been calculated as the, you know, in the numbers that is being prayed for the AU, have been featured there because they are assuming, because, you know, now this president and this regime has made the mountain its enemy. They are even, and I said on another show last Friday evening, I was on a different show, Fred, and I was saying this government is now, particularly this regime, because your government is the public servants, and those ones are not politicians. They're people who just work for government and go. But the politicians in this regime have now made the mountains an enemy, and unfortunately it's beginning to sound like what you are calling the 41 against 1, to make this an anti-Kikuyu campaign. And that's why I was praying that whatever happens, the mountain must be the deciding factor of this election. They should even choose a hawker for sure, a hawker from Mandera, and load him the 6 million votes to shame, just to, for the sake of shaming the characters from these other areas that want to deviate from the real business of oversighting government, which should be on service delivery, the issue of corruption. You know, those are the issues that we have to talk about. Economy and jobs, because that's what the young people are saying. 15 million young people who are jobless, Fred. You've raised grown-up kids. You hope they can get jobs and move on, isn't it? Have families and become something. But it's a bad feeling when you're a parent. You've invested in your son or in your daughter all the way to university. You spent hundreds of thousands of shillings paying uni, and they stay in the house. They have absolutely nothing to do. That is the debate. But you see, the characters that are in AU there are hoping that then they can be able to buy this ethnic number. That's why the president arrived there 2 days before. You know, this is I'm sure he was alone on the streets of Addis Ababa. You know, trying to force these numbers to get to 28 or 32 just because he's calculating that it might be able to help him. I pray for Raila Odinga as a Kenyan to succeed. You understand? I think it's in the good interest of the country, and also the diplomatic optics of it, being that he's a Kenyan leader, puts him on the table of G7. He can be able to throw in a few strings here and there and maybe attract some good interest in our country.
What happened to the Kenyan politics if Raila does not win the election?
Okay, this AU seat.
Do you see him, if he fails, do you see him vying in 2027?
Absolutely not. But you know,
absolutely not.
I don't think so, because when he loses the election, he will come back and now join the local politics. Although I'm not keen on him vying, but he might support someone, because even
let me before we disagree. Do you see Raila not, if he loses the election, do you see Raila not vying in Kenya? At a time when the president is the most unpopular president we've ever had.
Fred, I could have loved to give a different opinion, but I'm telling you, Kenya is a democratic state. Raila can even run at 106 years. You know, it is his constitutional right. There is a president in Cameroon called Paul Biya. He's like 92.
Yeah, the guy can't see or walk. But he's still hanging on to that. You want to tell me of all the sons born to the women in that country, he's the only one who can lead at that age. Anyway.
Okay, you know, Raila Odinga is a died in the whole Pan-African. He's someone with the charisma and the gravitas to actually lead Africa, because in these moments where we are seeing racial discrimination, truth to be said, in this world we are having races taking care of each other. That's why you see even the Europeans have Donald Trump, who is looking after Europeans in South Africa, the Caucasian in Israel. Even Xi Jinping is talking on behalf of the Chinese. Narendra Modi is talking on behalf of the Indians. So as Africans, we actually need a big voice, that can talk on our behalf on global issues. And this person, among the candidates which we are having for that post, I think Raila fits most. But now the problem is that for him to ascend to that seat is through a political process, whereby he needs to garner votes from other heads of states to support him. So him winning or losing is not a foregone conclusion, because many things can happen between today and tomorrow. Because in the past weeks, we saw Raila Odinga gaining the South Africans. But yesterday a shocker came that SADC has instructed its member states to vote for the guy from Madagascar. So that one has thrown the spanner into the works, because traditionally Raila has been getting support from, even when he was an opposition leader, we used to see the likes of Ramaphosa, Tshisekedi and Chamisa, even the late Magufuli. They were attending his ODM rallies even before they became presidents. So here we are waiting to see if the national interest will override personal interest, that the personal relationship with Raila, which Raila Odinga has with these presidents, or their national interest. Because right now, the Congo issue, it has really brought problems. Because when you see the posturing between Kagame and Ramaphosa, it means that these guys are aiming at each other's necks. And the issue of M23, yesterday the South Africans received bodies of their soldiers who had been killed in battle when fighting M23. So once this president see that Raila Odinga, who comes from Kenya, and Kenya as a government is supporting the M23, or not just supporting them, but it's giving them moral backing in their struggle against Tshisekedi. I think they can draw back and now say, this guy is no longer our ally, even if I as the president is in good books with him, but our nation, if I vote him, then there will be rebellion at home. So I think it will be a very delicate balance. But now the ramifications back at home, whether Raila loses or wins, there are going to be political earthquakes here in Kenya. Because one, if he wins, President William Ruto will come from Addis Ababa, a very rejuvenated guy, because he will have something to tell Raila Odinga supporters. He will tell, Baba has been looking for something all this while, and it only took my intervention for him to at least win. And even still, if he fails, Ruto will come back home and say, you all saw my efforts. You saw how I tried. I used to go with him when visiting other presidents. So whatever happens, William Ruto is aiming to draw political capital out of this race. And even when Raila Odinga loses, you know, some in opposition are wishing that once Raila Odinga loses this seat, he will come and join the opposition in the streets. But you know, politicians have interests, and only their interests are permanent. They don't have any permanent friends. Because when you look at the going-ons, Raila has already nominated his people into cabinet. Even this push and pull in parliament, his coalition might just become the majority if they pull it through. Although Speaker Wetangula has put a stop to it, but they still have other legal avenues to push this through. So if Raila comes back after losing,
if the status quo remains the same,
yes,
okay, if the situations remain the same, Raila Odinga loses the election, and the elections were called, the Kenyan elections were held today, and Raila Odinga, William Ruto, Matiang'i, and let's assume for, Rigathi Gachagua is there, do you see, how do you see that playing out?
On paper,
yes,
Gachagua becomes president that very day. If those four just appear on the ballot. You said William Ruto, Raila Odinga, Matiang'i, and then Gachagua.
Yes.
You can even throw in Kalonzo.
Yes, even Kalonzo.
On that day, Gachagua becomes president by virtue of numbers, because it's almost at 6 million. Assuming, I've said on paper, because then it's theory and then it means ethnic arithmetics. But you see, Fred, people have refused to define what time this country is in. And the kind of elections that we are looking forward to is going to be a little bit different because of the level of information, how woke the voter is today. That's why you can find, you've hosted very young people here,
Yes, yes.
20, 30-year-olds, who then have been able to define issues in a manner that you wouldn't expect in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and maybe the years before. So on paper, the president then loses the election immediately because then he's a minority, comes from minority community. That's one. But two, there's a threshold of what you're supposed to meet to become president in as far as the votes are concerned, which is then 50%, which even the president and Raila will not make it, you know, based on just where they come from. They will not be able to be in the top three, because then the top three would be the mountain, and then maybe Western and the Kalonzo and people going down to the coast there. You understand? So those will be the dynamics. And I'm saying it's my prayer for my long-time party leader that I wish him very well, that he wins something. You know, Fred, losing across 50 countries is much worse than losing in one country. We've lost in one country, and I can tell you it's a painful experience. I've voted 4 times, I lost 4 times. And Fred, is not a good feeling. Maybe you've been enjoying victories. I have never.
At all my elections, the people I voted for.
And you know the way they say.
You should come and see me and ask me to vote for you.
Yeah, to tell us the secret, Fred. I need to hang around you so that this winning vibe comes around. You understand? Because they say whenever the team loses, it's the supporters that feel the pinch of what is happening in the field.
Yes.
So it is with the supporters of ODM. And you know, ODM, Fred, is the party that has lost most of its members to political violence after elections.
True.
There is no other political party, not even Ford Kenya, that was there during multi-party. Because it was only the presidents of the regime puppets persecuting the politicians. But here I'm saying supporters come on the streets and you see dead bodies. Fred, when Raila came back, remember the famous Raila Baba returns?
Yes.
And we went to the airport and we came all the way. You know, people were gunned down.
Yes.
We went to the city mortuary with the women rep, Esther Passaris, because ODM had taken the matter as a personal matter, and they wanted to make sure that all the bodies that were brought into city mortuary postmortems were done correctly, so that the verdict remains that they were shot dead and not any other thing.
Yes.
And she was able to secure that, a bunch of bodies, almost 30, 40, 50 people.
Oh, that's
Fred, that was the very
people.
first time I saw with my own eyes 40 coffins of people that could have otherwise been minding their business. They did not die of cancer or some natural disease. No, they put bullets into their heads. And all this, majority of these were ODM supporters. Most of them were Westerners. And when I say Westerners, I don't mean Luya. I mean, they say Otieno.
Yes.
Or Nkundi in Kisii. Myself, I'm Oyuka.
Yes.
From Kakamega. The names of Paranya or Tuoma.
Yes.
I also have an own name.
Yes.
My great-grandfather that was named after is from the middle of Kakamega town, an area called Ngote. You might be able to know it, in Nabaholo constituency. You see, that's my own. We've carried the burden of opposition politics for years. It's been too tough. I pray we win something for a day. So it's my prayer that our party leader today wins something. Because if you lose, and then the whole continent confirms there is a failure, something that you wouldn't want of a father. Your father could be a pickpocket, but still your father. He might be stored.
As we bring the countries, let me hear your thoughts.
Well, Raila Odinga has really tried, and we must give it to him.
Give him credit there.
Yes,
the old man has fought for this country.
Let's give credit where it's due, because the old man, he might have his flaws.
Yes.
He might have made some mistakes in the past, but looking at the political structure and time that we are in,
yes,
Africa actually needs him more than Kenyans need him. Although every politics is local. So local politics will also come at play, even in case he wins. Because he has been telling us that Addis Ababa is just a stone throw away. Meaning that even if he goes there, he has already told his supporters that he will not be abandoning them. He will be there to offer leadership. He will be there to offer direction, even if it's in a peripheral manner. But we know the gravitas and the charisma that he has. Every word he says will be taken with the weight it deserves. Because even the other day he endorsed Sakaja. Yes. And you see the shockwave that it's sending in ODM. So even in 2027, whether he'll be in as AUC chair or he'll be a citizen like myself, his voice will really matter.
It will affect the way things happen.
Yes.
On one thing I disagree with him. I've not seen anything worth writing about the Nairobi governor. Maybe the Nairobi governor needs to come out and tell people what he has done. There's nothing we've, as a Nairobian, I've not seen anything. I had a lot of hope that Sakaja was going to basically do what he told us. He talked about, dividing the city into boroughs. And I really loved that. But nada, up until today, there's nothing that I can write home about Nairobi governor. Well, unfortunately, time is up. We've actually gone past time. We've got to bring down the curtains on this show. Let's pray for him. Let's pray for Raila Odinga that he at least wins this.
Yes.
It is good for him and his family. Yes. Let's wish him the best in that. Thank you very much, Sankara. Thank you, Ngaire, for coming.
Yes.
And thank you for participating. Do have yourself a lovely morning.
Have a good one too.